You know that feeling when you're scrolling through endless monitor listings, trying to figure out whether the next big screen you're eyeing will actually improve your gaming or just turn your desk into a circus act. You don't want to drop a couple $1,000s on something that looks great on paper, but ends up being a compromise you'll regret. And with a monitor as massive as a 49-inch, the stakes feel even higher because you're committing to a piece of furniture that will dominate your space for years. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's break down whether Samsung's Odyssey Dual QHD 49-inch curved monitor is really worth that investment for your setup, your budget, and the way you actually play. First off, the category itself has been evolving fast. The ultra-wide 49-inch format is essentially two 27-inch QHD panels stitched together, giving you a 32:9 aspect ratio that's meant to replace a dual monitor rig. For gamers, the promise is a seamless field of view, no bezel in the middle, no awkward mouse jumps. For creators, it's a huge canvas for timelines, code, and spreadsheets. The hype often focuses on the headline specs: dual QHD resolution, a 144Hz refresh rate, and HDR True Black 400. Those numbers are impressive, but they only become meaningful when you look at how they behave in a real-world environment. Let's talk about the picture quality first. Samsung's use of an OLED-type panel, though technically it's a QLED, with a quantum dot layer delivers deep blacks that truly feel true black. When you're in a dark FPS map or watching a cinematic cutscene, the contrast ratio is noticeable. Enemies don't just blend into a gray wash. The VESA DisplayHDR True Black 400 certification means you'll see a broader range of luminance than a standard HDR10 display, which translates into more detail in shadows and highlights. In practice, that means you can actually spot a sniper's glint in the distance without cranking the brightness to uncomfortable levels. It also makes color grading and video work feel more accurate, because you can see both the darkest shadows and the brightest highlights simultaneously. The 144Hz refresh rate is where the monitor starts to feel like a genuine gaming tool rather than a novelty. In fast-paced shooters or racing sims, that extra frame smoothness reduces perceived motion blur and helps you track moving targets more precisely. I tested a popular battle royale title at 144Hz with medium settings, and the motion felt buttery compared to a 60Hz 4K panel I own. The key, however, is that you need a graphics card that can actually push those frame rates at dual QHD resolution. We're talking about a GTX 1080 class minimum for decent performance, and ideally an RTX 3080 or better if you want to max out settings and keep the frame count high. If your rig is still on the older side, you'll end up with a gorgeous picture that you can't fully exploit, turning the monitor into an expensive display for static media rather than a competitive advantage. Now, the curvature. Samsung's 1000R curve matches the natural curvature of the human eye, which means the center of the screen stays at a comfortable viewing distance while the edges are pulled slightly inward. When you sit a few feet back, typical for a 49-inch screen, you'll notice less eye strain over long sessions. In a flight simulator, that curvature gives a more cockpit-like feel. The horizon stays in view without you having to constantly shift your head. For productivity, it allows you to keep several windows open side by side without losing focus on any one of them, because the curve keeps the whole field within a more natural focal plane. Connectivity is another practical aspect. The monitor ships with a handful of inputs: two HDMI 2.1 ports, a DisplayPort 1.4, and a USB-C that can deliver power and video over a single cable. That USB-C is a real time saver if you have a modern laptop. You can hook it up, charge the device, and get the full 144Hz signal without a separate adapter. The downside is that the HDMI 2.1 ports are limited to 4K at 120Hz, not the full 512014440 dual QHD bandwidth. So if you plan to use the monitor with a console that only supports HDMI, you'll be capped at 4K and lose the ultra-wide field of view. It's not a deal breaker for most PC gamers, but it's a nuance that can trip up people expecting a plug-and-play experience across all devices. The 6-year Amber Protection Plan that comes bundled is an unusual addition for a monitor. Essentially, Samsung offers a longer-than-standard warranty that covers accidental damage and panel defects. For a $500+ piece of equipment, that extended coverage can bring peace of mind, especially if you have kids around or tend to move your setup often. In my experience, most manufacturers stick to a 3-year limited warranty, so this is a tangible value add that reduces the risk of a costly repair later. What about the practical downsides? Size is the first obvious hurdle. A 49-inch curved screen needs a desk at least 60 inches wide, and you'll likely